Welcome to Aligned for Success podcast, where we help chiropractors create practices that truly serve their life's vision. I'm your host, Dr. Nikki, and I'm here to show you how to break free from stagnation, grow your practice, and rediscover the joy of why you became a chiropractor to begin with. Whether you're looking to boost your revenue, spend more time with family, or simply enjoy practice life again, you're in the right place. Let's align your path to success. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Aligned for Success. Today, I'm super excited because we have a very special guest whose name is Colin, and Colin Carr is the founder and CEO of CARR, the nationwide leader in healthcare real estate. Colin knows that busy doctors need to focus on serving their patients. The last thing they need to worry about is being taken advantage by their landlord. His team of experts has grown into a vast coast-to-coast network of thousands of agents, healthcare providers, and partners, assisting with startups, lease renewals, expansions, relocations, additional offices, and purchases. CARR's mission is to help healthcare providers maximize their profitability through real estate. Welcome to the show, Colin. Thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Nikki. I appreciate it.
Yes. Okay. So tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. Where are you located? What's your favorite type of real estate? Give us the tea.
Yeah. So I'm in Castle Rock, Colorado is where I live. And our corporate office is Lone Tree, Colorado. So they're both Denver suburbs. Been there for almost 25 years now. And essentially, we started this company back in 2009, and it was born out of my experience on the landlord side, where I watched a number of healthcare providers just get completely annihilated in commercial real estate negotiations. I was a landlord broker working for some of the largest medical landlords in the country. And I had just transaction after transaction where doctors would show up without representation, or we'd be doing a lease renewal and they would miss their renewal options. They would not know what to ask for. They would tell me things they weren't supposed to tell me as the landlord agent. And so the long story short is, after a number of deals where I was the landlord agent helping the landlords maximize their profitability, I realized how vulnerable healthcare providers are in these transactions. And they're going up against highly sophisticated professional negotiators that are very good at what they do. And it was just, in my opinion, a completely unfair fight. So I made the decision to go healthcare only, to go tenant buyer only, and started CARR at the beginning of 2009 with the game plan of helping them, helping protect healthcare providers, advocate for them, and just help them to level the playing field in these negotiations.
Love that. I'm literally already going through my brain like, okay, what have I done wrong? Because I know it's definitely a lot, especially like when you sign your first lease, you're just like, I don't know anything about this, just I need a place to practice. So what are the top mistakes that you've seen healthcare providers make when it comes to their office space?
Well, I love the way that you frame that. A lot of times healthcare providers look at like getting a lease signed as like a success. And like, sure, there's a level of success there. But the question is, did you overpay by $100,000 or $200,000? Did you miss several months of free rent or a much higher tenant improvement allowance? Did you have to borrow money that you should not have borrowed, or more money than you should have borrowed? Did you miss key business negotiation points like exclusivity clauses or an option to purchase, or assignability clauses? Like, there's so many things that happen both on the economic and on the business side, where a lot of healthcare providers look at it and they think, all right, I found a location, I got a lease signed, maybe I moved the needle a little bit as far as better terms than what were presented originally, and they consider that a win. And that's not where the win happens. The win happens in getting a lease signed or closing on a purchase, but it's the economics and the business deal points that determine whether you truly won or lost. So with that being said, the top, I could give you literally probably 15, 20 places we see people making mistakes consistently. But if I were to narrow it down to the top 3 or 4, I would start with the number one mistake healthcare providers make is they don't hire representation. They take the do-it-yourself approach, and that's just fraught with pitfalls, complications, delays, and it typically results in them losing literally a couple $100,000. you're engaging in a high dollar negotiation with a landlord that has a property that's typically worth millions of dollars. So, I mean, it could be a smaller property, but a lot of these multi-tenant buildings, retail or office, they're multi-million dollar transactions just to even buy these buildings, let alone to operate them. So you're going up against a professional landlord that negotiates for a living, and you take the do-it-yourself approach. Well, here's the problem with that. There's no sophisticated company in the world that has some random person doing their real estate. Like if you were to look at any retailer, take like Chipotle or Starbucks or Whole Foods or something like that, every one of those companies has a team of real estate professionals, both internally, and they still hire brokers on the outside as well. If you look at office users, like pick a large office, like a Charles Schwab or a Chase Bank or, a Lockheed Martin, like pick some large Amazon, some large office or warehouse user. Every one of these companies has internal and external teams of real estate. So when a doctor shows up against a professional landlord, the landlord knows the doctor is not educated. They know that they're not a market expert. They know that they've not taken the time to go to the market and fully evaluate all their options. So that landlord is going to start that negotiation from the very beginning, assuming they're going to be able to take advantage of that doctor, and it puts them in a compromised position even starting the negotiation.
Would you say that like one of the most common things that doctors get quote overcharged on, is it rent? Is it like a triple negative lease? Is it kind of dependent on where you live, or what's your experience with where doctors are really kind of dropping the ball on where they can negotiate?
Yeah, so lease rates are no question going to be at the top of that list. Annual increases, 99% of all leases have an annual increase. That's going to be an area where they miss it. Concepts like free build out allowance, like how much time do you get to build out your space before your rent starts? How much free rent do you get once your space is built out or on a lease renewal? Getting free rent even on a lease renewal, they're going to miss it on that term. Concepts like what amount of money is the landlord going to contribute for the build out or renovation? Landlords pay big dollars to get new tenants into long-term leases. So both in a new lease, but even on a lease renewal, there's a lot of money available to get your space renovated or upgraded to the current standards of the day. So that's a big one right there. And then you get into concepts like, personal guarantees or assignability clauses or, things like that affect your ability to expand or sell your practice in the future, or to protect your practice by not having a competitor drop on top of you, or like a relocation provision. There's all these non-economic business deal points that are tied to the economics, but they're focused primarily in the business term realm. Those are all areas that are in play. And if you miss it on even a few of those, like it adds up. Like when I say that people lose $100,000, $200,000, most people hear that like, how is there that much money on the line? Well, if you're in a standard size healthcare space, let's say you're in 2,500 square feet, and you're overpaying by $3 a foot, which is very easy to do, that's $7,500 per year. And then you take an annual increase of 3 or 4% over 10 years, and all of a sudden you've hit $80,000, $90,000 just in that one area. If you don't get the amount of free rent you should get in a negotiation, and you get maybe a month of free rent or two, and you could have gotten 4 or 5, well, there's another $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 that you missed out on getting. If you don't get the right tenant improvement allowance, it's the same thing. All these numbers are exponential and continue to add upon each other. And so it's very simple to look at a deal and to get a lease signed and to think, okay, I did a pretty good job. But to realize where you ended up versus where you could have ended up, it's very easy, $100,000, $200,000. And that's in a standard or a small size space. And that's on maybe even a shorter term deal. You look at these larger spaces for larger healthcare groups like multi-practice or multi-doctor practices, like it adds up $500,000 to $1 million in some of these bigger deals very quickly.
That's crazy. And like the biggest takeaway that I'm taking of this is that whatever we've been taught was quote like expected or normal for our area probably isn't. It's just that nobody knows that you actually don't have to have I was like, oh, I have escalated rent. Could I have not, And my lease was 9 years long, which is a really long lease. So by the time when I started versus where I'm at now, my rent will be significantly different. Yeah. And I'm also like, what's going to happen when that's next? So I'm really glad we're having that conversation because that happens in a year. So now I know I shouldn't be doing this by myself. So
yeah, I mean, if you take that premise, like think about this one. If a landlord, like on a lease renewal, you have a lease renewal coming up, if the landlord calls you and says, hey, Nikki, your lease expires in a few months, what do you want to do? And you say something like, hey, send me a proposal. What you've just said is, I've not hired representation, which means I've not been to market. I don't know what my other top options are. If I was running this show, I would have called you before you would have called me. I've been way ahead of this process. And so all these indicators are, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have a true advocate on my team. I'm probably willing to pay a lot more just for the fact that I don't want to be inconvenienced right now. And so that approach versus 12 to 15 months prior to your lease expiring, you hire an expert agent that focuses exclusively on healthcare. That agent takes you to market, shows you your top 7 or 8 properties, both to lease and to purchase, shows you all your options, retail and office. You're fully educated in the market. And then you pick the top 3 or 4 properties to negotiate on, because in commercial real estate, you negotiate in a non-binding format. Like residential real estate, you go look at a house, you like it, you submit a contract, the seller signs it, you're under contract, you're in a binding document. Commercial real estate, you trade paper back and forth, and it's in a non-binding letter of intent format. So you can go after 3 or 4 properties simultaneously legally, and that's how the top players in real estate do it. So in that case, you go 3 or 4 rounds of negotiations with 3 or 4 landlords. Your agent's running the process, so you're not taking time from your practice. They're just keeping you updated, and you're going back and forth on emails and calls. And then once it's fully negotiated, then your agent calls the landlord and says, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, I represent Dr. Nikki, et cetera. We've been to market, and we've got 3 or 4 options teed up, ready to go. We know exactly what her other options are if she were to relocate, if she were to purchase, if she wants better visibility or retail signage. Like, we've got everything figured out, and we'll submit an offer to you based upon the terms it would take for her to want to stay in this property. And so then all of a sudden you are dictating those terms, and you're not submitting terms where the landlord's going to tear up the document and say, move out of my property. You're not going to bankrupt the doctor or the landlord with that offer, but you're in control of the process. The landlord's never going to give you an offer that's favorable for you. It's not going to happen. It's like, if you've ever read like the legal terminology of a credit card agreement, like it's never in favor of the card holder. It's
right.
You ever look at a student loan document or an auto loan or a mortgage, like it's always in favor of the person issuing the credit. Landlords aren't going to give you a lease that's in your favor, both with the legal terminology, and they're not going to give you terms that are a great deal for you. It's always going to be to their advantage. And so if you're going to level the playing field, they've got to know that you know what you're doing. You're not going to be taken advantage of. You've got expert advice helping you. You've got an advocate. And if they're going to keep you in their building as a tenant, they're going to have to come with legitimate fair market terms. And that's what happens when you have an agent that runs the process. So that's the second thing I'd say healthcare providers don't do, is they don't negotiate with multiple landlords or sellers. They just pick one landlord or seller and they trade paper, and you have no idea if it's a good or a bad deal. And so that, again, just the mindset of, I've got 3 or 4 options. I'm not beholden to one person or one landlord. If I don't like their terms, I'm not stuck in a corner. I don't put all my eggs in one basket. If you take the approach of, I could stay and renew, I could go and purchase, I've got 3 or 4 options, I'm fully in control, I have got enough time to transact, you're going to put yourself in a position where you don't get stuck, forced into a deal. And that's a huge difference.
That's great advice. So you talk about leasing and purchasing. When is a good time for a healthcare provider to choose between if they're going to continue to rent or if they think it's time to maybe purchase a building?
Yeah, I mean, we're always in favor of looking at purchase options. Doesn't mean you have to purchase, but just knowing what's out there is a really, really savvy idea. And so a couple of things are going to determine if you can or cannot purchase. Number one, inventory. There's some areas of the country where if you want to be in a certain submarket, you might not have any options to purchase. Like in residential, there's always another neighborhood. You can always drive a little further. But in business, you might say, look, I can't get away from this zip code or this intersection or my top referral sources. And so inventory can determine whether or not you have one option, 4 options, or no options. The next thing is just the economics. Do you have enough money for the down payment? Can you support the monthly cash flow? A lot of times it does cost more to own than to lease, but you pick up a lot of additional benefits like principal pay down, and you can depreciate, and you can do other things that help you from a tax standpoint. So can you afford the annual cash flow, the monthly payment? And then you get into concepts like I just mentioned, like what are the additional tax deductions? What's the depreciation? what's the principal pay down, and all those numbers tell a story. And so you could have two properties, one's for lease, one's for a purchase. And there's a lot of times we can go out there and buy a piece of real estate, a building or a condo or something. You could build it out with Class A finishes. And then after you factor in all those benefits, the effective cost of owning might be very, very close to leasing or even better. In that case, it's just a personal decision. Like, do you want to own versus leasing? If the numbers make sense, if the property makes sense, I'm a huge advocate of owning real estate because it's another asset. Like, all of a sudden you have the value of your practice, which has a saleable value, but also has an income associated with it. If you own that real estate, you do a 15, 20-year mortgage, that's a commercial mortgage, not 25 or 30 like residential. And after 15, 20 years, your asset's paid for free and clear. And so you've got the value of your practice and you have the value of the real estate. And in like literally 90% of the time, that real estate's worth more than the practice. So all of a sudden you have two assets now versus one. And there's a lot of other benefits too, like not having to deal with landlords every 5 years, not getting threatened to get kicked out, not dealing with, co-tenants or neighbors you don't want that are less than desirable. There's all those things that you just can avoid. You take on some additional responsibility for sure, but with that responsibility comes some huge benefits too.
I assume that's something that you and your team would help people figure out. What's the best option? Is it continue to lease? Is it purchase? Just seeing all available options for your clients.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the best advice I can give someone is hire an expert agent, let them take you to market. And then you're not just guessing. You're not wondering if you should have looked at an option to purchase. Like, if you go to market and there's 3 options to purchase, and let's just say 2 of the properties are just not at the quality you want or not the right location, and then one of them you love but you can't afford it, then you don't have to wonder, should I have purchased? Like, you just eliminate that as an option, saying, unfortunately, the inventory is not there or the pricing doesn't work. But if it is there, then you run the numbers and you go down that process. And then at that point, you make an educated decision. Like, one of the top things that we talk about is you're looking for peace of mind. You're looking for, to eliminate, like, should I have done this? What if this would have happened? Or why didn't I? Like, those types of things. Like, you did a 9-year lease. What you don't want to do for 9 years is say, I blew this opportunity or I should have done it differently, because you can't undo that. Like, you don't get a mulligan or, a redo on that one.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, a good broker can't force the market to do something that it won't do, but it can show you, a good broker can show you all your options, help you figure out what makes sense. And then you make an educated decision. And then that you didn't leave money on the table. You didn't miss seeing a better property. You didn't miss considering a purchase. And when you do that, you make a decision with confidence and peace. And that peace of mind is very valuable.
Love that. Okay, so what is something that healthcare providers would need to know about their lease if they were to sell or transition out of practice?
Yeah, so the timing of the transition, if they have a lease, is very important. So most lenders who are going to lend money for the person to buy your practice, they're going to want to see at least the same amount of term available on the lease, either in a lease term or an option that correlates to the length of the loan. Like, for instance, if there's only 1 year left on a lease and the loan to buy the practice is 10 years, you're going to have to either renew that lease or have option periods added to it, because a lender doesn't want to lend money to a doctor, have them buy a practice, and then have the landlord kick them out, or they realize they can't afford the rent. They have to move and they have to borrow another $500,000 to do it. So getting a lease term that matches, or a lease term with options that matches the loan term, is very important. Another thing is assignability. If you have a lease, you have to make sure you have an assignability clause if there's term left, because landlords don't have to let you transfer the lease without an assignability clause. Like, you think that's a standard, it's not. And so do you have an assignability clause? And then we can dig a little deeper, because you might have an assignability clause, but it might say that the landlord doesn't have to let you off the lease. Sure, you can assign it, but you're going to stay on as a guarantor. That's a terrible place to be. That's like selling your house and like being a guarantor for the person who buys your house's mortgage. Like, you don't want to be there. And so terminology with assignability is important. And I could get into a lot of nuances there, but that's a big one too. And so the questions of like timing, when are you going to sell your practice? How does your lease tie into it? When you should renegotiate that lease, like, those are all things that can be addressed fairly quickly. But oftentimes, I'll leave it as this last caveat. A lot of times you can renegotiate your lease, for enough time between the lease and the options to satisfy the lender. You could get free rent to help improve your cash flow. You can get money to renovate your space so it's a more desirable space for the buyer. And then you can position that buyer for the best lease terms possible because you had it professionally negotiated. So a lot of times you can really accelerate a sale or make it a much more desirable transaction if you handle the real estate with an agent prior to selling it, because you eliminate them having to negotiate or them having to work with their bank, and you can essentially knock out all those concerns. You can get an assignability clause that fully removes you from the lease, and you can protect yourself but also protect them as well.
Nice. So it sounds like too, a lot of what you and your team does is not just help people find leases, find the best options, but if they were interested in getting out of a lease or doing a transfer, selling their practice, you guys also help accommodate that.
Correct. Yeah, we don't list the practice as a practice broker, but we handle all the real estate that's tied to it. And the top two things that kill a practice sale or transition, number one, are going to be the economics or the financing, but number two is going to be the real estate. And so, handling that process, you can do things in advance that doesn't guarantee a perfect transaction, but it'll make it a lot smoother, and you can take a lot of variables off the table, both for you and the buying doctor, if you do it in advance and you do it properly.
Love that. Okay. Well, I have one last question for you. This is about real estate, but not so much. But if I were to just ask you, what is one thing that you've done over the course of your career, one decision you've made that has helped align your life for success, what would that one thing be?
It's a great question. I would tell you it's choosing to specialize. It's going from being trying to be the jack of all trades or the answer to everyone's question or problem, to being somebody who is laser focused in an area. And that's really what we've done with real estate. There's every form of real estate under the sun. There's industrial, office, apartments, land, et cetera. We chose commercial, then we chose healthcare only, and then we chose tenant and buyer rep only. So we are as specialized as we can be. With it comes just the laser focus, and we know that we know we're the best solution for the client. And with that comes the best results. So we believe that we're doing a great service to the healthcare community, and we're proud of what we do. We love what we do. And we pass on a lot of opportunities that are not inside those lanes. But, for us, we feel like it makes us the best solution.
I love that. And saying no to things that don't align with who you are to make more room for helping the people that you're meant to serve. Truly love that. Where can our guests find you? On social media? What's the best way to get in contact with you? Yeah,
we're on all the major social sites, but the best way to get a hold of us is our website, and it's carr.us, so CARR.us. You can click to find an agent in your state or your area. You can start a conversation. You can just click the contact button as well too, and then we'll get a hold of you that way. But a lot of ways to connect with our team. And then also, if you want to increase your education in the realm of commercial real estate, we have a resources tab that will keep you as busy as you want to be for as long as you want to be busy. We've got articles, blogs, videos, and they're all educational. So glossary, FAQs, again, you don't have to become the healthcare real estate expert, but if you want to just feel like I know more about it or I understand the process better, we'll get you to the place where you're confident that you're going down the right direction or right road, and it'll give you a lot more ability to make the right decision in the future.
Amazing. That's awesome. I will be sure to link that in the show notes. Well, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to help explain to everyone the benefits of having someone like you on their team so that we can save more money and make sure that we're making aligned decisions for our financial health. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to another episode of Aligned for Success. And thank you very much, Colin. And we will see you all next week.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks for tuning in to Aligned for Success. If today's episode resonated with you, please be sure to subscribe and leave a review. This helps other chiropractors find their way to practice freedom too. Remember, true success comes from when your practice aligns with your life's purpose. Until next time, I'm Dr. Nikki Cottis, reminding you that a thriving practice and a fulfilling life go hand in hand. See you next week.